Lieutenant Jinho gripped his plasma rifle tighter as explosions rocked the Valyrian flagship around him. Smoke filled the corridors, while emergency lights flickered red. This was it, humanity's last chance. Earth's entire fleet was destroyed, and only his small boarding team remained alive. "Sir, we're getting slaughtered out there," his sergeant whispered through the comm. "The Emperor's guards are everywhere." Jinho nodded grimly. 3 years of war had brought them to this moment. The Valyrians had superior technology, bigger ships and more soldiers. But humans had something else, pure stubborn determination and the ability to think outside the box. He kicked open the doors to the Imperial throne room. Emperor Kithar stood waiting, a massive figure in golden armor that gleamed under the chambers. Bright lights. The alien ruler was twice Jinho's size, with 4 arms and natural armor plating that could stop bullets. "So the little human comes to die," Kithar rumbled in perfect English. "Your species fought well, but this ends now." Around the throne room, 3 beautiful alien women watched silently. These were the Emperor's wives: Astra with her battle scars and warrior's stance, Nera in elegant diplomatic robes, and Vera, whose eyes seemed to glow with mysterious power. They expected to watch their husband crush this human like an insect. "Maybe," Jinho said, dropping his rifle, "but we do things differently where I come from." The Emperor laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "Hand-to-hand combat? You cannot possibly win." But that was exactly what Jinho was counting on. Valyrians were used to honorable, straightforward fighting. They had rules and traditions that governed everything. Humans, especially desperate humans, didn't always play by the rules. The fight began with Kithar charging forward like a battering ram. Jinho rolled aside at the last second, something no Valyrian warrior would ever do. They considered dodging cowardly. As the Emperor stumbled past, Jinho grabbed a ceremonial sword from the wall. "Stand and fight properly," Kithar roared. Instead, Jinho kept moving, using the room's pillars and decorations as cover. He was smaller and faster, turning the Emperor's size against him. When Kithar swung his massive fists, Jinho ducked under them. When the Emperor tried to grab him, Jinho slipped away like water. The 3 wives watched with growing amazement. No one had ever fought their husband like this before. It was unconventional, unpredictable, and completely effective. After 20 minutes, the mighty Emperor was breathing heavily, frustrated by his inability to land a solid hit. That's when Jinho struck. Using a move he'd learned in human martial arts, he swept Kithar's legs while the Emperor was off balance. The giant alien crashed to the ground. Before anyone could react, Jinho had the ceremonial sword at Kithar's throat. "Yield," he said simply. The throne room fell silent. Emperor Kithar, who had never lost a battle, stared up at this impossible human. Slowly, he nodded. "I yield." The moment those words left his lips, something strange happened. Ancient runes, carved into the throne room walls, began glowing blue. The 3 wives gasped as old laws, forgotten by most, suddenly activated. "By the ancient code of succession," Vera whispered, her mystical knowledge revealing the truth. "Whoever defeats our Emperor in honorable single combat inherits everything he possessed." Jinho looked confused. "Everything?" Astra stepped forward, her warrior's pride warring with shock. "His crown, his empire, and his 3 wives. You are now our husband and our Emperor." As the reality sank in, Jinho realized his victory had created an entirely new problem. He'd saved humanity, but now he was married to 3 alien women and responsible for an entire galactic empire. Jinho's eyes opened slowly, his head pounding like someone had hit him with a hammer. The bed beneath him felt wrong, too soft, too big, and definitely not his military cot. Golden silk sheets covered him, and the ceiling above was decorated with strange alien symbols that seemed to shift and move in the dim light. "Finally awake, are we?" The voice was cold as ice. Jinho turned to see Astra standing by the massive window, still wearing her battle armor. Her arms were crossed, and the look she gave him could have frozen fire. "Where am I?" Jinho asked, sitting. "Up slowly." "Your Imperial chambers, husband," Nera said from across the room, practically spitting the last word. The diplomat was pacing back and forth like a caged animal, her elegant robes swishing with each angry step. "Congratulations, You've just inherited the most complicated political mess in the galaxy. Vera sat quietly in the corner, her glowing eyes fixed on him with an expression he couldn't read. The ancient laws cannot be broken, she said softly. What was done yesterday binds us all. The events came flooding back. The fight, the victory, those glowing runes. Jinho rubbed his temples, trying to make sense of it all. This has to be some kind of mistake. Tell that to your people, Astra snorted, pointing at a communication device on the bedside table. They've been calling non-stop since the news broke. Jinho picked up the device and immediately wished he hadn't. The screen showed dozens of missed calls from Earth's High Command, the President's office, and the United Nations. The latest message made his stomach drop. Lieutenant Jinho, this is Admiral Park. What the hell did you do up there? Every news station on Earth is calling you the accidental Emperor. Get back here immediately for debriefing. But it was the second message that really worried him. Son, this is President Kim. We need to talk. The entire Valerian fleet is still out there, and apparently they're all waiting for orders from you now. We have no idea how to handle this situation. Your people fear us, Nira observed, watching his expression. As they should. One human cannot possibly understand the complexities of ruling our empire. I never asked for this, Jinho muttered. Setting the device down. Neither did we, Astra shot back. Yesterday I was a respected military commander with my own fleet. Today I'm legally bound to a human who probably can't even pronounce half our planet names. The insult stung, but Jinho could hear the pain behind her anger. These women had lost everything too. Their freedom, their status, their futures. They were stuck with him just as much as he was stuck with them. The law states we must remain in your presence, Vera explained quietly. We cannot leave this ship, cannot return to our duties, cannot even make decisions without your approval. We are prisoners in golden chains. Jinho looked around the luxurious room that felt more like a prison cell. Through the window, he could see Earth in the distance, looking impossibly small and blue. His home planet where people were probably panicking about their accidental alien emperor. What happens if I just refuse? He asked. What if I say I don't want to be emperor? The three women exchanged glances. It was Nira who answered, her diplomatic training showing. The empire would collapse into chaos. Millions would die in the hour, resulting civil wars, and we would be executed as widows of a failed ruler. Great, Jinho sighed, falling back onto the silk pillows. So I'm trapped, you're trapped, and two entire civilizations are counting on us to figure this out. Welcome to Imperial life, Astra said grimly. Hope you're ready for the worst job in the galaxy. The first week as Emperor nearly drove Jinho completely insane. He'd thought fighting aliens was hard, but living with three of them while trying. To run two civilizations was like juggling bombs blindfolded. It started with breakfast. Jinho was trying to eat his simple meal of rice and eggs when Admiral Kim called for an emergency video conference. Earth's military leaders filled the screen, all looking tired and stressed. Jinho, we need you to order the Valerian fleet to withdraw from our solar system, Admiral Kim said urgently. Our people are terrified seeing those massive ships hovering near Earth. Before Jinho could answer, Astra stepped into view of the camera. She was wearing full battle armor and looked ready for war. Admiral Kim, she said with icy politeness, I challenge you to single combat for questioning my husband's authority. The human officers on screen went pale. Admiral Kim stammered, What? We don't do duels here. Then you are cowards, Astra declared. In our culture, disputes between warriors are settled with honor, not words. Jinho quickly ended the call, but the damage was done. Within an hour, Astra had challenged 12 different human officers to duels, called the entire Earth fleet weak and pathetic, and demanded that all human soldiers prove their worth in combat trials. You can't just challenge everyone to fights, Jinho explained for the third time. Why not? Astra replied, genuinely confused. How else do you determine who deserves respect? Your military hierarchy makes no sense. Meanwhile, Nira had taken it upon herself to fix humanity's diplomatic mistakes. Jinho found her in the communications room, speaking directly to Valerian fleet commanders. Yes, Lord Commander Vex, Earth's surrender terms are quite reasonable, she was saying smoothly. They will provide tribute in exchange for protection. As is proper when a superior civilization conquers a lesser one. What surrender terms? Jinho demanded, rushing over. Nira looked at him like he was stupid. Obviously, Earth must formally surrender to the Valyrian Empire. You may be emperor now, but your planet is still a conquered territory. I'm simply making the transition official. Earth wasn't... You won a single duel, Nira corrected patiently. That's very different from winning a war. I'm negotiating to save your people from complete destruction. It took Jinho 2 hours to convince the Valyrian commanders that Earth was not surrendering, which only confused them more about his authority as emperor. But the worst problems came from Vera. Her telepathic abilities, which she couldn't fully control, were driving the human crew members crazy. People started complaining of strange dreams, hearing voices and knowing things they shouldn't know. Captain Lee knows about Sergeant Park's secret gambling debts, reported his security chief. Dr. Wong suddenly started speaking fluent Valyrian, even though she's never studied the language. And somehow everyone in engineering knows what Commander Hayes had for breakfast 3 days ago. Jinho found Vera meditating in the ship's chapel, surrounded by floating candles that moved without any wind. You have to stop reading people's minds, he said gently. Vera opened her glowing eyes. I cannot help it. Human thoughts are so loud and chaotic. Your people think about 17 different things at once. It's giving me headaches. Well, it's giving my crew nightmares. Perhaps your crew should learn to quiet their minds, Vera suggested unhelpfully. That evening, Jinho sat alone in his quarters, holding his head in his hands. His communication device was buzzing with angry messages from Earth's government, complaints from his crew, and demands from various Valyrian nobles who wanted to know why their new emperor was living on a primitive human vessel. Astra entered, without knocking, as usual. You look defeated. I feel defeated, Jinho admitted. I don't know how to do this. Every time I try to solve one problem, you 3 create 5 new ones. Perhaps, Astra said, sitting across from him, the problem is not us, but your approach. What do you mean? You're trying to command us like we're human soldiers, but we're not human and we're definitely not your soldiers. She leaned forward. We're your wives, your partners, your equals. Start treating us like it. Jinho's approach changed completely after Astra's words. Instead of trying to control his 3 wives, he decided to understand them. The next morning, he did something that shocked everyone. He asked for help. I need to learn about your culture, he announced over breakfast. All of it. Laws, customs, everything. Will you teach me? The 3 women exchanged surprised glances. Vera spoke first, her voice cautious. Most conquerors simply impose their own ways. I'm not most conquerors, Jinho replied. I'm just a guy who got in way over his head, Nira raised an eyebrow. You want to study Valyrian law? It's incredibly complex. There are over 3,000 years of legal precedents. Then we better start now, Jinho said, pulling out a tablet. Where do we begin? What followed were the most intense weeks of studying Jinho had ever experienced. The women took turns teaching him, and slowly he began to see their world through their eyes. Astra taught him military customs while they sparred in the ship's gym. Combat isn't just about fighting, she explained, easily blocking his punch. It's about honor, respect, and proving your worth. When I challenge your officers, I'm not trying to hurt them, I'm trying to understand their strength. But humans don't work that way, Jinho said, trying a different attack. We respect people for different reasons, their knowledge, their experience, their character. Astra paused mid-strike. Character? How do you measure character without testing it in battle? We have other tests, Jinho replied, like how someone treats people weaker than them, or whether they keep their promises when it's difficult. For the first time since he'd known her, Astra looked genuinely curious. Show me, she said. Nira's lessons were equally eye-opening. She taught him about Valyrian politics while they reviewed diplomatic reports. Marriage among our nobility is never about love, she explained matter-of-factly. It's about creating alliances, sharing resources, and ensuring political stability. What about personal choice? Jinho asked. Nira laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. Personal choice is a luxury for common people. Those of us born into power Have duties that come before our desires. That sounds lonely, Jinho said quietly. The comment caught Nira off guard. She stared at him for a long moment. It is, she admitted, but it's also necessary. The Empire's stability depends on strategic marriages. What if there was another way, Jinho asked. What if marriages could be both strategic and based on mutual respect? Nira tilted her head, considering. That would require both parties to be equals. In our society, wives are typically subservient to their husbands. Well, I'm not asking you to be subservient, Jinho said. I need partners, not servants. Vera's teachings were the most challenging. She guided him through meditation, techniques that helped him understand her telepathic abilities. I don't choose to read minds, she explained as they sat in the quiet chapel. Thoughts simply flow into me like water through a broken dam. That must be overwhelming, Jinho said, trying to clear his mind as she'd taught him. It is. But it also lets me see truth that others miss. She opened her glowing eyes and looked at him directly. When we first met, your thoughts were full of fear and confusion. But underneath there was something else, genuine concern for others, even for enemies. I just don't like seeing people suffer, Jinho said. That's why the ancient laws chose. Just, Vera said softly. Power usually corrupts, but you carry power like a burden, not a privilege. As the weeks passed, something unexpected happened. The three women began asking Jinho about human customs in return. They were genuinely curious about his culture, his beliefs, and his way of thinking. Your people value individual freedom over collective stability, Nira observed during one of their evening discussions. It should create chaos, but somehow it works. It works because we believe people make better choices when they're free to choose, Jinho explained, even if they sometimes choose wrong. Interesting, Astra mused. In our culture, we believe structure prevents mistakes. Both approaches have merit, Vera added thoughtfully. Perhaps the best solution combines both. Slowly, mutual respect began growing between them. They were still legally bound by ancient laws, but the hostility was fading. Instead of 3 angry prisoners, Jinho found himself with 3 brilliant advisors who were starting to see him as more than just an accidental conqueror. The change didn't go unnoticed by the crew, who reported that the ship's atmosphere had become much more peaceful. Even the telepathic disruptions had decreased as Vera learned to shield her abilities better. The emergency alarm pierced through the ship like a knife. Jinho was in the middle of a language lesson with Nira when red lights started flashing everywhere. Within seconds, his communication device was buzzing with urgent messages. Emperor, we have a serious problem, came the voice of Fleet Commander Zax, one of the few Valyrian officers who had remained loyal. Duke Thiran has declared your rule illegitimate. He's gathering support from the outer colonies. Jinho's blood ran cold. Duke Thiran was Emperor Kithar's cousin, a powerful noble, who controlled 3 star systems and commanded a massive fleet. If he was rebelling, things were about to get very ugly. What's his claim? Jinho asked, though he already suspected the answer. He says your victory over Emperor Kithar was achieved through trickery and cowardice. According to him, dodging attacks and using unconventional tactics violates the honor code of single combat. Astra entered the room just in time to hear this. Her face went dark with anger. Thiran always was a pompous fool, she spat. He's just angry that a human succeeded. Where he failed. Failed? Jinho asked. Thiran challenged Kytha for the throne twice, Nira explained, joining them. Both times, he lost using traditional fighting methods. Now he claims your different approach was somehow cheating. Vera appeared in the doorway, her eyes glowing brighter than usual, a sign she was agitated. I sense great conflict among our people, she said quietly. Many are torn between loyalty to tradition and acceptance of change. The situation got worse quickly. Over the next few hours, reports flooded in from across the Empire. Some nobles were joining Thiran's rebellion, while others remained loyal to Jinho, but many were simply waiting to see which side would win before choosing. We're looking at a civil war, Nira said grimly, as they reviewed the tactical reports. Thiran has convinced nearly 40% of the fleet that you're an illegitimate ruler. What does that mean for us? Jinho asked. It means, Astra said slowly, that we have to choose sides. The weight of her words hit everyone in the room. The three women weren't just Jinho's wives, they were prominent Valyrian leaders with their own followers and political connections. Their choice would influence thousands of others. Thiran has already sent us messages, Nira admitted reluctantly. He's offering us pardons if we renounce our marriages and join his cause. He claims we're forced into these unions against our will. The question hung in the air like a challenge. Technically, they had been forced into marriage by ancient law. They could easily claim coercion and join the rebellion with honor intact. Astra was the first to speak. 3 weeks ago, I would have jumped at that chance, she said honestly. I was furious about being bound to a human I barely knew. And now? Jinho asked. Now I've seen how you lead, she replied. You don't demand obedience. You earn respect. You don't rule through fear. You rule through trust. That's something Thiran never understood. Vera nodded slowly. In the old Emperor's court, wives were decorations who stayed silent during important decisions. You ask for our opinions and actually listen to our answers. Thiran represents everything. Wrong with the old system, Nira added. He believes power should be inherited, not earned. He thinks strength comes from tradition, not innovation. But he's still your people, Jinho pointed out. I'm just a human who got lucky in a fight. Lucky? Astra laughed. You studied your enemy, identified his weaknesses, and adapted your strategy accordingly. That's not luck. That's intelligence. Besides, Vera said with a small smile, the ancient laws don't make mistakes. If you weren't meant to be emperor, you wouldn't have won. Nira pulled up a star map, showing Thiran's forces in red and loyalist forces in blue. The galaxy looked like it was bleeding. The question isn't whether we support you, she said firmly. The question is how we stop this war before it destroys everything our people have built. Thiran won't negotiate, Astra warned. He's too proud. He'd rather see the Empire burn than accept human leadership. Then we'll have to defeat him, Jinho said grimly. But I want to do it with minimal bloodshed. These are your people fighting each other. There has to be a better way than just shooting until one side gives up. The three women looked at each other with something that might have been pride. Their strange human emperor was still thinking like a protector, not a conqueror. That, Vera said softly, is exactly why we're staying with you. The war room had become their second home. Maps of the galaxy covered every surface, with red markers showing Thiran's forces and blue ones showing loyalist positions. The situation looked grim. The rebellion was growing stronger each day. Jinho stood at the center table, feeling overwhelmed by the complexity of managing a galactic civil war. Just 6 months ago, his biggest worry was passing his lieutenant's exam. Now he was responsible for preventing an empire from tearing itself apart. We can't win this through brute force, he said, studying the tactical displays. Thiran has too many ships and too much support. Agreed, Astra said, marking several key positions on the map. But we don't need to win through brute force. We need to be smarter. She pointed to a cluster of systems near the Empire's edge. Thiran's strength comes from his alliance with the outer colonies. They're supporting him because they feel ignored by the central government. What if we changed that? Jinho asked. Astra smiled, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her. Exactly what I was thinking. Instead of attacking his strongholds, we target his supply lines and communication networks. Small, precise strikes that disrupt his operations without causing massive casualties. Over the next week, Astra proved why she'd been one of the Empire's most respected military commanders. She coordinated lightning-fast raids that hit Thiran's forces where they least expected it. Her teams would strike a supply depot, disable a communication relay, or rescue civilians from occupied worlds, then disappear before enemy reinforcements arrived. It's working, she reported after their 5th successful mission. Thiran's forces are getting frustrated. They're spread too thin trying to protect everything at once. Meanwhile, Nira was fighting a different kind of battle. She spent her days in long video conferences with wavering nobles, using every diplomatic skill she'd learned over decades of political maneuvering. Lord Voss is reconsidering his support for Thiran, she told Jinho during one of their evening briefings. His daughter was caught in one of Thiran's purification raids on a civilian station. She barely escaped. Purification raids? Jinho asked, not liking the sound of that. Thyron claims he's cleansing the empire of human influence, Nira explained, grimly. He's been attacking any Valerian who's worked with humans or supported your rule. It's getting brutal. That's horrible, Jinho said. Those people were just doing their jobs. Which is exactly what I'm telling the nobles, Nira replied. Many of them have family or friends who've been targeted. They're starting to realize that Thyron isn't interested in restoring honor. He wants power, and he'll hurt anyone who gets in his way. Her diplomatic efforts were paying off. Every day, more nobles switched sides or at least declared neutrality. The rebellion's support was slowly crumbling as people saw Thyron's true nature, but it was Vera who provided the breakthrough they needed. Her telepathic abilities, which had once caused so many problems, became their greatest advantage. I've been monitoring communications from Thyron's flagship, she reported during a late-night strategy session. His thoughts are revealing. What kind of revealing? Jinho asked. Vera's eyes glowed as she accessed memories from her psychic surveillance. He's not just fighting to restore Valerian tradition. He's been embezzling resources from the outer colonies for years. The rebellion is his way of covering up massive corruption. Can you prove it? Nira asked eagerly. Better than that, Vera smiled. I can show you exactly where he's hidden the stolen wealth, and I know which of his supporters are involved in the scheme. The information Vera provided was devastating. She revealed secret bank accounts, hidden supply caches, and evidence of Thyron selling Empire resources to black market dealers. Most damaging of all, she exposed how he'd been using rebellion funds to buy himself luxury items while his soldiers went without proper equipment. This changes everything, Nira said, reviewing the evidence. If we release this information, his remaining supporters will abandon him immediately, Astra finished. No one wants to follow a corrupt leader who's been stealing from them. For the first time since the rebellion began, Jinho felt hopeful. How do we get this information out? Leave that to me, Nira said with a diplomatic smile that was somehow terrifying. I still have contacts throughout the Empire. By tomorrow morning, every noble house will know exactly what kind of leader they've been supporting. As they worked late into the night, coordinating their three-pronged attack on Thyron's rebellion, Jinho realized something had changed. The three women were no longer just his legal wives or reluctant advisors. They had become genuine partners, each contributing their unique skills toward a common goal. Ayuno, he said as they finally prepared to get some rest. A few weeks ago I thought having 3 wives would be my biggest problem. And now? Astra asked with amusement. Now I'm thinking 3 brilliant partners might be exactly what this empire needs. The women exchanged glances, and for the first time their smiles held real warmth. They were no longer just bound by law, they were bound by choice, respect, and a shared determination to build something better than what came before. The distress signal came in at 3 in the morning, jolting Jinho from his sleep. Emergency. Lights flashed as his communication device screamed with urgent alerts. The message was brief but terrifying. Thyron's forces were attacking the civilian colony of Nexus Prime, home to over 2 million Valerian families. It's a trap, Astra said immediately when the command team assembled. Thyron knows we'll respond to civilian casualties. He's using innocent people as bait to draw our forces into an ambush. The tactical display showed the grim reality. Nexus Prime was deep in rebel territory, surrounded by Thyron's strongest fleets. Any rescue mission would mean flying straight into enemy guns with little chance of escape. How many ships does he have waiting? Jinho asked. At least 50 warships, the tactical officer reported, maybe more hiding in the asteroid fields. We'd be outnumbered 5 to 1. Then we don't go, Nira said logically. It's a strategic disaster waiting to happen. We preserve our forces and find another way to help. Jinho stared at the display showing Nexus Prime. The colony's communications painted a horrible picture. Families huddled in shelters while Thyron's soldiers destroyed infrastructure and terrorized civilians. Children were crying for their parents. Elderly people couldn't reach safety in time. No, he said quietly. We go. Jinho, it's suicide, Astra protested. You'll be throwing away everything we've worked for. Look at those reports, Jinho replied, pointing to the incoming messages. Thyron isn't just attacking military targets anymore. He's hurting innocent people to get to me. If I let that happen because it's strategically smart, then I'm no better than he is. Vera studied his face with her glowing eyes. You're serious about this? Completely serious. Those people didn't choose to be part of this war, but they're suffering because of it. That's on me. The three women exchanged worried glances. They'd grown to respect Jinho's judgment, but this seemed like madness. Even if we somehow reach the colony, Nira argued, we can't evacuate 2 million people with our current fleet. The transport capacity isn't there. Then we make multiple trips. Multiple trips? Astra looked shocked. That means staying in enemy territory for days, maybe weeks. Every trip increases the chance we'll all be destroyed. I know the risks, Jinho replied, but I also know what happens if we do nothing. Those people will die, and everyone in the Empire will see that their new emperor abandoned them when they needed help most. Vera placed her hand on his shoulder, reading his emotions directly. You're not doing this for political reasons, she realized. So you genuinely care about people you've never met. Of course I do, don't you? The simple question hit them harder than any argument could have. In the old empire, rulers were expected to make cold calculations about acceptable losses. Personal. Feelings were considered weakness, but here was their emperor, willing to risk everything for strangers. The rescue mission was a nightmare from start to finish. Thyron's ambush was even worse than expected, with hidden ships attacking from multiple directions. Jinho's fleet fought running battles, while shuttles desperately ferried civilians to safety. We're taking heavy damage, Astra reported, as explosions rocked their flagship. Hull breaches on deck 7 and 12. We need to retreat. How many? People are still on the surface, Jinho asked. About 400,000, came the reply. Then we stay. For 3 days, the battle raged around Nexus Prime. Jinho's ships were battered, his crews exhausted, but they kept fighting. When their weapons ran low, they used ramming attacks. When their shields failed, they used asteroids for cover. When their engines were damaged, they limped forward on emergency power. The three queens watched their husband push himself beyond all limits. He went without sleep for 72 hours, personally coordinating every rescue shuttle. When medical supplies ran short, he gave his own emergency kit to wounded civilians. When food became scarce, he rationed his meals to make sure rescue teams had enough energy to keep working. Emperor, you need to rest, Vera urged as Jinho swayed on his feet during the 4th day of operations. After the last transport leaves, he mumbled, checking the evacuation status on his tablet. Nira found him in the shuttle bay, personally helping load injured civilians onto the final rescue ship. His uniform was torn and dirty, his face haggard with exhaustion, but he was still working. Why? She asked quietly. Why risk everything for people who barely know your name? Jinho looked at her with tired but clear eyes. Because that's what leaders do. They protect people even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. When the last civilian shuttle finally launched, Jinho's battered fleet limped away from Nexus Prime just ahead of Thyron's reinforcements. They'd saved nearly everyone, but at enormous cost. Half their ships were damaged, supplies were critically low, and they'd used up months of military resources in a single operation. But something else had happened during those 4 days of desperate fighting. Word of the rescue spread throughout the Empire faster than any official broadcast. Stories of the human emperor, who risked everything to save Valerian civilians, became legend overnight. The outer colonies are calling you the People's Emperor, Nira reported a week later, showing him the intelligence reports. Support for Thyron is collapsing everywhere. Apparently, saving Nexus Prime proved you're nothing like the tyrant. He claimed you were. Astra nodded approvingly. Soldiers respect courage, but what you showed was something more. You showed them that power should serve people, not the other way around. Vera smiled softly. The old emperor would have calculated acceptable losses and moved on. You calculated how to save everyone and found a way to do it. Jinho looked at his 3 wives, his partners, and realized they were seeing him completely differently now. The doubt and suspicion that had lingered since their first meeting was finally gone, replaced by something much stronger. You're not just our emperor anymore, Astra said quietly. You're our leader, and we'd follow you anywhere. The rebellion ended not with a massive battle, but with a whimper. After the Nexus Prime rescue, Thyron's support crumbled so completely that even his closest allies abandoned him. The corrupt Duke was captured trying to flee to enemy territory, with stolen Empire funds, exactly as Vera had predicted. Jinho stood in the throne room of the Imperial flagship, watching through the massive windows as the last rebel ships surrendered. After months of civil war, peace had finally returned to the Empire. He should have felt victorious, but instead he felt exhausted and uncertain about the future. The coronation ceremony is scheduled for next week, Nera informed him, reviewing the official documents. All the major noble houses want to formally recognize your rule now that the rebellion is over. And then what? Jinho asked. I become a permanent alien emperor? Rule over people I barely understand for the rest of my life? The three women exchanged glances. They'd been discussing this exact question privately for weeks and had finally reached a decision that would surprise everyone. Actually, Astra said carefully, we need to talk to you about something important. They sat around the conference table where they'd planned so many strategies during the war, but this conversation felt different, more personal, more serious. The ancient marriage laws, Vera began slowly, were created during a time of crisis to ensure stable transitions of power. But they were also emergency measures, never meant to be permanent. What are you saying? Jinho asked, though he suspected he already knew. We're saying, Nera continued, that now that the Empire is stable, those laws no longer apply. We can dissolve our marriages if we choose to. Jinho felt a strange mix of relief and disappointment. Relief because he'd never wanted to trap anyone in an unwanted marriage. Disappointment because, well, he'd grown to genuinely care about these three. Remarkable women. Is that what you want? He asked quietly. That's just it, Astra said with a small smile. We've been asking ourselves the same question for weeks. Vera leaned forward, her eyes glowing softly. 6 months ago, we were prisoners bound by ancient law to a stranger we resented. Today, we're partners who've built something extraordinary, together. The question, Nera added, isn't whether we want to dissolve the old marriages. The question is whether we want to create something new. Jinho looked confused. New? What do you mean? We mean, Astra explained, a partnership based on choice instead of law. An alliance built on mutual respect instead of ancient obligations. But what would that look like? Jinho asked. The three women smiled, the first time he'd seen all three of them happy at the same time. We've been working on that, Nera said, pulling out a thick folder. What if we created a completely new form of government, one that combines the best of human and Valerian systems? Over the next hour, they outlined their vision. Instead of a traditional monarchy with one all-powerful emperor, they proposed a council system where decisions were made collectively. Jinho would remain the symbolic head of state, but real power would be shared among multiple leaders with different expertise. Astra would oversee military and security matters, Vera explained. Nera would handle diplomacy and trade relations. I would manage internal affairs and cultural integration. And what about me? Jinho asked. You'd be the tiebreaker when we disagree, Astra said. Plus, you'd represent the Empire to other species and handle crisis situations. Think about it, Nera added excitedly. Humans value individual freedom and innovation. Valerians value stability and tradition. What if we created a system that honored both? The proposal was brilliant. Citizens would have more personal freedoms than traditional Valerian law allowed, but within a stable framework that prevented chaos. Local planets would govern themselves in most matters, but the central government would coordinate defense and trade. Most importantly, leadership positions would be earned through merit and popular support, not just inherited through bloodlines. It's never been tried before, Jinho said thoughtfully. Neither was a human defeating a Valerian emperor in single combat, Vera pointed out. Sometimes the best solutions are the ones nobody's thought of yet. But would people accept it? Jinho wondered. Both species are pretty set in their ways. The rebellion taught us something important, Astra said. People are ready for change. They're tired of the old system that put power in the hands of whoever happened to be born into the right family. Plus, Nira added pragmatically, we'd be transitioning gradually. No sudden changes that would shock people. We'd prove the new system works through results, not force. Jinho studied the detailed plans they'd created. It was ambitious, risky, and completely unprecedented. It was also exactly the kind of innovative thinking that had gotten him into this situation in the first place. There's one more thing, Vera said quietly. This partnership, it would be voluntary on all sides. Any of us could leave at any time if we wanted to. But we don't want to, Astra added firmly. We've seen what we can accomplish together. Why would we break up a winning team? Jinho looked at the three women who had become so much more than he'd ever expected. Partners, advisors, friends, and maybe something even deeper than that. So let me get this straight, he said with a growing smile. You want to dissolve our forced marriages so we can voluntarily create the most... When you put it like that, Nira laughed, it sounds completely insane. I love it, Jinho said. Let's change the galaxy. 5 years later, Jinho stood on the observation deck of New Harmony Station, watching ships from dozens of different species dock at the massive spaceport. Human vessels flew alongside Valyrian cruisers, while alien traders from across the galaxy came to do business in what had become the most prosperous region of known space. Hard to believe this all started with one really awkward breakfast, Astra said, joining him at the window. She was wearing her new uniform, not the rigid military armor of the old empire, but a practical design that mixed human and Valyrian elements. I was just thinking the same thing, Jinho replied. Remember when you challenged half of Earth's military to duels? In my defense, they really were terrible at hand-to-hand combat, Astra grinned. Though I admit my diplomatic skills needed work. Their new government system had exceeded everyone's expectations. The Cooperative Council, as it was officially known, had brought unprecedented peace and prosperity to both civilizations. Planets governed themselves according to local customs, but worked together on trade, defense, and major decisions. The quarterly reports just came in, Nira announced, entering with a tablet full of data. As the Council's Director of External Affairs, she handled relations with other galactic powers. Economic growth is up 18%, and we've had 0 military conflicts for 14 months running. Any complaints from the old noble houses? Jinho asked. A few grumbles about traditions being abandoned, Nira shrugged. But it's hard to argue with results. Even the most stubborn conservatives admit that people are happier and more prosperous under the new system. The key to their success had been gradual change. Instead of overthrowing everything at once, they'd proven their ideas worked through small pilot programs. When those succeeded, more planets asked to join. When those succeeded, entire star systems wanted in. Now their cooperative model was being studied by governments across the galaxy. Vera emerged from the meditation chamber, where she conducted her daily mental wellness sessions. Her telepathic abilities, once a source of chaos, now helped resolve disputes and facilitate understanding between different species. The integration program graduated another 1,000 families today, she reported happily. Humans and Valyrians learning to live and work together in mixed communities. Any problems? Jinho asked. The usual cultural misunderstandings, Vera smiled. Like humans thinking Valyrian greeting rituals are too formal, and Valyrians thinking human casual conversations are somehow disrespectful. But they're working it out. The mixed communities had been Jinho's idea. Instead of keeping the species separate, they'd created places where families could choose to live together, sharing traditions and learning from each other. The children growing up in these communities spoke both languages fluently and saw cooperation as natural, not strange. Speaking of families, Astra said with unusual shyness, we have some news. Jinho turned to look at his three partners. They'd stopped using the word wives years ago, preferring the more equal term. Something in their expressions made his heart race. What kind of news? He asked carefully. The kind that's going to make you panic for about 5 minutes before you get excited, Nira said with barely contained joy. I'm already panicking, Jinho admitted. Vera stepped forward, her eyes glowing with happiness instead of their usual mysterious light. The medical scanners confirmed it yesterday. All three of us are pregnant. For a moment, Jinho's brain simply stopped working. Pregnant. All three. At the same time. He opened his mouth to speak, closed it, then opened it again without making any sound. And there's the panic phase, Astra observed with amusement. How, when all three, Jinho finally managed. Apparently, Neera said with diplomatic understatement, our recent anniversary celebration was more successful than we realized. The anniversary celebration had been their private recognition of the day they'd chosen to stay together as partners rather than dissolve their marriages. It had been a week-long vacation on a beautiful planet, where they'd finally been able to relax and enjoy each other's company without political crises interrupting. Are you happy? Vera asked gently, reading his emotional state. Or are you terrified? Both, Jinho said honestly. Definitely both, but mostly happy, I think. Ask me again in 5 minutes. The three women laughed, and the sound filled Jinho with warmth. They'd come so far from those first angry, awkward days, when they'd all been trapped by ancient laws and mutual resentment. 3 babies, he said wonderingly. Our children are going to grow up in a galaxy where humans and Valyrians are partners, not enemies. They'll probably think it's completely normal, Astra said. Multiple species working together, shared governments, cooperative exploration of new worlds. The galaxy their children will inherit will be even better, Neera added. Each generation builds on what the previous one accomplished. As the 4 of them stood together, watching the bustling activity of the space station they'd built, Jinho reflected on the incredible journey that had brought them here. A desperate battle that should have ended in death had instead created life in ways he'd never imagined. You know what the best part is? He said finally. What? Vera asked. We didn't just save 2 civilizations. We proved that completely different people can choose to become family. Astra squeezed his hand. Even when it starts with the most awkward arranged marriage in galactic history. Especially then, Jinho smiled. After all, the best families are the ones you choose to build together. Looking out at the stars, surrounded by the 3 remarkable women who'd become his true partners in every sense, Jinho knew that their greatest adventures were still ahead of them. They'd forged something unprecedented, a union built on choice, respect and love rather than law and obligation, and now they were about to add 3 more members